as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Thursday, September 25th, and it seems like hardly a day goes by now without the news commenting on and reporting more political violence. We saw yesterday, even as this program was airing live, that there was a targeted attack on a Dallas ICE facility. Now that has left one detainee dead and two more, including the shooter who then turned the gun on himself. We've seen all of the political violence, of course, from the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the stabbing of the young woman on that train in North Carolina, and then the post-millennial, and then a couple of school shootings as well, I should mention, of course, and then from Minneapolis to my former home state of Colorado, and then the post-millennial reporting the man yelling "Free Palestine" was arrested for opening fire on a New Hampshire country club, killing one. So what exactly is going on here? How do we make sense of this? And what should we anticipate moving forward in terms of our leaders actually resolving some of these issues? Well, let's welcome in Andy No. He is the senior editor for the Post-Millennial. Andy, your thoughts overall on all of these stories. I think it's important to kind of start with a broader view of what I would call domestic terrorism, certainly, and President Trump is labeling Antifa a domestic terrorist organization along, with others. But a lot of this doesn't necessarily seem like it is coordinated. Some of it does. What are your thoughts, and what do we know so far?
I think we are entering a time now of a assassination culture on the left. And anybody who still thinks we're dealing with cancel culture needs to catch up with the reality of how the times have changed. The radical left have not been shy or quiet about their advocacy for deadly political violence for a very long time now. That's the core of my reporting on Antifa and their militant supporters on the left. And I've seen in the last decade how that type of dangerous rhetoric has been mainstreamed on the left to the point where Democrats felt very emboldened to use and borrow some of the language from Antifa, and maybe we are living with the consequences of that now, in that individuals who may not be connected to any particular militant violent networks have been seeping in this environment of dehumanization of conservatives and being told day in and day out that we're dealing with a fascist government, a fascist president, fascist supporters, Nazis who want to kill and genocide trans and people of color, and all these lies. And it doesn't take very much for an individual to decide to take up violent direct action. In fact, they are encouraged to.
And I was speaking with Andy No, who's the senior editor for the Post-Millennial, and you raise a really good point that worldview matters, and this type of insidious lie and indoctrination of those on the left to say that the current administration and conservatives at large and Christians, but conservatives in particular, are fascists, that Trump is a Nazi. We've heard that since 2015 practically. I mean, so over the last decade. It's no wonder then why a lot of these young people, and even we saw the attempted assassin of President Trump on the golf course convicted yesterday, and he wasn't even a young person. Clearly, I think there were some mental issues going on, but really it boils down to worldview. That if you're claiming seriously that conservatives and MAGA supporters are Nazis, well, you want to fight evil. And being told that these people are evil, and then being told that life doesn't matter, and then being told, all of these other insidious lies, then it logically follows that they wouldn't have the respect for life and would say, well, I'm going to eradicate all of the Nazis. I mean, it seems to, in their view, logically make sense. So why should the left be surprised when these would-be political assassins actually attempt, and unfortunately Charlie Kirk at times succeed in the logical conclusion of their worldview?
Yeah, exactly. It is the rational conclusion to what they have been claiming day in and day out. And we can also look at the reaction from large segments of the left after Mr. Charlie Kirk was assassinated. People were not shy about celebrating it, justifying it, and even some were calling for other targets than to be taken out because they felt emboldened. In fact, I hope that maybe one outcome of that horrific murder is that it was eye-opening for the right, that this large segment exists on the left, and they are supported by journalists who often express that view or legitimize that view in some way. We've seen a lot of people, commentators, and those in the media, somehow trying to downplay that type of sentiment is on their side, and or making excuses for it. They have a bloodlust that people should be aware of, is my point. Is I don't think the status quo can remain anymore. I don't see how you can have a united country with such a large faction being bloodthirsty and not being called out on their own side.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, they're suggesting that Jimmy Kimmel was more of a victim than Charlie Kirk, which is, utterly just on face insane. Jimmy Kimmel was able to go back to work. Charlie Kirk, unfortunately, will never have the opportunity even to hug his wife or kids anymore. Their commentary is grotesque. So, Andy, is this a global trend, what you're seeing in your reporting, or is this uniquely acute in the United States right now?
I believe it's uniquely acute to the United States, unfortunately. I'm speaking to you from London. I had to leave the US because of violent threats on my life from Antifa and the violent far left. And in my times traveling abroad, there's not this level of leftist radicalization to the same degree in other places, in other Western countries. I mean, every nation has their militants and radicals on the fringes, but their type of messaging is not amplified day in and day out by the mainstream parties, as well as the media, as well as all the institutions. So.
Wow, and that's, I mean, how this is so personally affected you is terrible, and we will all, as an AFR family, pray for your safety, of course, because no one should have to live or change their lives because of those types of violent threats. What do you see as being unique in the United States compared to the rise of extremism and an ideology, and especially the trans ideology, even there in the UK? But what do you see about it that's so unique in the United States that has given rise to this assassination culture?
Well, because it's very easy for individuals to access deadly weapons in the US. And I'm not trying to make this about a Second Amendment argument or debate, but that is the reality. And the militants on the radical left, the trans activists, the Trantifa, they are exploiting the rights and protections in the US. So a lot of them for several years now have been encouraging one another to join leftist militias, to stockpile firearms. Um, and so they're taking in this ideology that Nazis are trying to kill them and they need to train for it. And then they have access to firearms and ammunitions and armor, and they're showing it on their social media posts and in groups online. They're proud of it, and so we have a very you could say explosive situation where one of them easily has the means of carrying out a lone wolf attack or working in coordination with a group or network to bring weapons to riots, as they are known to do.
And I'm speaking with Andy No, who's the senior editor for the Post Millennial. You can follow him on social media. I'd encourage you to do that, especially support his journalistic reporting if you would like to. And Andy, how does this current climate compare with past eras of political violence, or maybe even isolated acts of political violence in America, say the 1960s or 70s?
Left-wing political violence in the U.S. is not new at all. We have been really gaslit that as if it's like not a problem. There's been in the West a history of a century of revolution and upheaval and assassinations and killings by leftist revolutionaries. In the U.S., our history with left-wing extremism goes to the 60s and 70s. It was really a climax. You had all these groups, so whether underground, the Symbolize Liberation Army, the Black Liberation Army. In Germany, you had the Red Army faction, and they were communist terrorists, is what they were. And their legacy is that they've been treated as heroes in some ways, in that you can see how members of these terrorist organizations, once they were released from prison for convictions ranging from murder, bombings, killings, they were completely welcomed into the mainstream left. They became academics. They entered into white-collar professions where they had influence over younger people, and their ideas continue to be perpetuated. So the U.S. has never grappled with far-left violent extremism, and I would argue that the militant leftist networks that we have today are ideologically, spiritually descended from the legacy of the 60s and 70s left-wing terrorists.
And with that, and the growing rise, and also a very different just culture in terms of social media, online access, the ease of, frankly, of radicalizing more individuals, and the ease of coordination for things like this. How are law enforcement and protective services adjusting to this climate, and what are some solutions?
Well, I welcome the executive order from President Trump declaring Antifa a terrorist organization, although they are better understood as a network, really, rather than a singular organization, since there are many Antifa groups. The DOJ is going to need to be very creative and committed to breaking up some of these networks. It's going to take a lot of work. I think they can do it through federal conspiracy charges or even RICO charges, because we're talking about organized crime, organized violent criminality. The State Department can designate Antifa formally as a FTL, foreign terror organization, because some of the American Antifa networks do maintain close links financially or methodology with methods through their international co-conspirators. Local law enforcement, and this is really key, and this is going to be a big challenge. They need to do a whole lot more about understanding and recommending charges against local cells. Like in Portland, Oregon, where I'm originally from, where some of the most violent organized riots have happened because of Antifa. I don't think the Portland Police Department really understands or wants to understand the organized nature of Antifa. They really have treated every suspect who's been arrested amongst the 1,000 plus, let's just say in 2020, as like an individual who committed an act of arson or felony assault or use of an explosive device, rather than this is an individual who was trained, who worked in coordination with others in a plan.
And it is incredibly important that there are solutions to this. And I see President Trump focused on some of those solutions, like even wanting to send in the National Guard to places that have just violence, period, that the left is refusing to address. But then especially toward the political violence. So last question before we have to take a break here. And I so appreciate your time this morning. Andy No, he's the senior editor for the Post Millennial. Where do you see the hope in all of this in terms of, maybe with the Charlie Kirk Memorial and a lot of people who are recognizing that political violence and those who are motivated to target innocent people, there is such a difference between disagreeing with someone and even cancel culture versus political violence.
Yes. People need to wake up to how the times have changed. I mean, the reactions that we saw to the disgusting reactions we saw to Kirk's killing weren't new. We had several attempts on President Trump's life last year that were welcomed and celebrated by many in the mainstream left. Luigi Mangione is treated as a hero and celebrity. And people held a dance party in Manhattan last week when some of the terrorism charges were dismissed against him. So this is what we're dealing with. Like recognize it, understand it, and become aware. Yeah. First things first is just to acknowledge it, and it's a disturbing thing to acknowledge. These are people who we live with, work with, and maybe in our families, and we just have to keep pushing at the conversation that there's a radicalization problem that's happening, and there's still so much denial about that on the left.
All right. Well, Andy, really appreciate your time this morning. We have to break here. But, this is a conversation that I think needs to be ongoing, that we have to demand solutions to, not just from law enforcement, our political leaders, those in power, but we also have to address the fundamental ideology. And, as we've always said, as Christians have always said, the most important and fundamental right is the right to life. And those who don't respect that and understand that and who are willing to advocate for abortion, especially late-term abortion, physician-assisted suicide, completed life wills, all of these things, it just goes to train them to have a cognitive dissonance and a disrespect for life. And then you can see how that logical conclusion would then be, well, even somebody I disagree with, is unworthy of continuing to live. It's terrible. We have to always go back to the Christian worldview. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Candace talks about finding out she was pregnant. Thankfully, an ultrasound provided by Preborn allowed her to hear her baby's heartbeat.
The sonogram sealed the deal for me. My baby was like this tiny little spectrum of hope. And I saw his heart beating on the screen. And knowing that there's life growing inside, that sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to mom. Thank you to everybody that has given these gifts. You guys are giving more than money. You guys are giving love.
Preborn currently has clinics that do not have ultrasound machines. Would you consider a leadership gift and sponsor a machine today? These life-saving machines cost $15,000, more than most centers can afford. Your donation will save countless lives for years to come. Dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/AFR.
If you are 65 or older, you know this. Inflation is hitting everyone hard right now, especially when it comes to healthcare. Over the last 10 years, Healthcare costs have skyrocketed by, get this, 230%. If you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are still out-of-pocket expenses like deductibles and copayments, and they really add up. But here's some good news. MediShare 65 Plus is designed to fill in those gaps and help protect you from rising healthcare costs. At only $99 per month up to age 75, you get peace of mind at a price you can afford. And MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around 30 years. It's not some big impersonal thing. It's a community of people helping each other, business owners, pastors, retirees. People love it. MediShare 65 Plus just makes sense. To learn more, give them a call. They're great to talk to. They'll offer to pray with you each time you call, too. Call now, 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE, 833-45-BIBLE.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton wants school kids to recite the Lord's Prayer. He also wants kids to start reading the Bible. The Attorney General releasing a statement this week calling on all schools to set aside time for prayer and the reading of Scripture. He says in Texas classrooms, they want the Word of God open, the Ten Commandments displayed, and prayers lifted up. The Texas legislature passed a bill that allows school boards to adopt policies that would permit voluntary prayer and Bible reading. Paxton says his office will defend any district that faces legal challenges. The Attorney General says he also wants to encourage kids to start their day with the Lord's Prayer as taught by Jesus Christ. In my new book, Star Spangled Blessings, I wrote about President Trump's call for prayer. He said that if we really want to make America great again, Americans need to read their Bibles and go to church. Wise words and a reminder that we are indeed one nation under God. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and we're talking about this rise in political violence, assassination culture, but is broader even than that. We've seen the weaponization of lawfare, the targeting of Christians even by our own government. We've seen this culture that does not support life, does not recognize that life at every stage of conception, from the moment of conception all the way until natural death, is worth protecting, because every human being is made in the image of God, has inherent dignity and worth. And all of these things go back fundamentally to ideology. What do you believe is the truth about life? What do you believe is the truth about the right to freedom of speech? What do you believe is the proper role of government? What do you believe about the principles of liberty? What do you believe about anthropology, human beings, all of these things? What do you believe about theology? If there is a measurable difference between good and evil, right and wrong, then that screams that there must be a God and we are not him. And therefore, who is he and what does he require of us? All of these things are interconnected to the ideology that now we are seeing on the left that gives rise to the logical conclusion of their false and evil worldview that has perpetuated this culture that is untenable. We cannot live in a well-ordered society that protects liberty and freedom, and especially life, and share policy in any way with those who not only want to target Christians literally and with lawfare, but also have no respect for life and have no respect for the principles of liberty. So where do we go from here? Well, let's welcome in my good friend Dinesh D'Souza. He's a director of a great new movie we're going to talk about in a little bit, but also the host of the Dinesh D'Souza Show. And my friend, this is a moment I think that is very critical in American history, and Christians have an obligation to speak truth and to point out this false and insidious worldview. How do we handle this moment?
Well, Debbie and I were at the funeral and the memorial service for Charlie Kirk, and it occurred to me that the whole mood could go in one of two directions. It could kind of go into a dark direction of pure counter rage and retaliation, recrimination, or it could go into a direction of renewal, moral and spiritual strength, rebuilding institutions, And I'm happy to say I think that is the direction it's going in. And I think we have to rise to the occasion, and we have to, fill Charlie's kind of big boots. And we need to speak out. We need to stand for what is right. People often say that this is a battle that is a kind of spiritual warfare, right? Underneath our political debate is a cultural debate, and underneath that is a moral debate, and underneath that is a spiritual debate. But they don't really often say who's fighting. And I think the answer is, and this is a theme in the film, although we can come back to it, is the real fight is always between God and the devil. That primordial fight in heaven at the beginning of time, that is always what it comes back to. And all our lives and all the events of our lives and all the things going on in the world should be seen through that prism, and things will become a lot more clear.
And absolutely, we always have to go back to the anchor that is the Word of God and the truth, and build up from there. And I think that we have kind of seen, maybe we can describe it as sort of a smorgasbord of the worldview, where we have different pieces and different components that at times come together, but instead of one composed dish of saying, here is the biblical foundation, and then we build up from there in the subject matters like theology, then anthropology, and then to policy, and then to the purpose of government, and all of these different things that have to be grounded in truth, and we build up from there. We tend to start with, as conservatives sometimes, we tend to start with the subject matters and then kind of say, well, this is what I think, and hopefully it ties into a biblical worldview. And especially when we're talking about, institutions and policy and government that seems at times attenuated from its anchor. How do we start practically doing exactly what we've been talking about, I think, over the last 2 weeks, especially since Charlie's murder, building a foundation and a culture of truth in all of these areas, when we've seen for a while that there are factions and disagreements, even among the right. I mean, that's kind of been one of my convictions, Dinesh, over the last 2 weeks, is that this is a battle between good and evil. It's a spiritual battle, and I need to stop not just the infighting, like we need to call out obviously our own side if they're doing something wrong, but to collaborate with those who are at least on the same trajectory, even more so, because Charlie did that so well, building bridges.
Yeah, I'll answer the question, but let me just spend another minute laying this sort of foundation. We often think about, like, what does God want me to do? What is God saying to me through his word and through the scriptures? But one thing we don't think about that I think we should think about more is the opposite, which is to say, what is the devil up to? What is his strategy? How does he operate in the world, right? So let me suggest this. If you look, for example, at the Garden of Eden and ask a simple question, why was Satan so eager to ruin Adam and Eve? Like, what did he have against Adam and Eve? His quarrel was with God. But the truth of it is Satan cannot defeat God. So what does he do? He gets his kicks, he gets his laughs, he gets his revenge by going after the things that God values, that God likes. So he goes after man, because man is God's cherished creation. Satan goes, if I can ruin man, I'll get the last laugh on God. Satan goes after the Jews for the exact same reason. The Jews are the chosen people of God, so Satan goes, guess what? If I can ruin them. So I see the rise of this anti-Israel, anti-Jewish sentiment on the left and on the right as a reflection of, like, satanic handiwork. There's just no other kind of way to put it, and it shouldn't be, like, disguised or there's just a bad element to it. I'm not saying that there aren't well-meaning questions, but I'm saying that behind it there are some very malevolent operators, and ultimately it's sort of the father of lies who's behind all that. So I think that by being attentive not just to the positive will of God, but to the negative strategies of the evil one, we can be far more attuned in what's going on in our world.
So well said, and I think that this shouldn't then take us off guard, and it shouldn't surprise us when we are battling against evil and we see evil in the world and we see some of these things that did specifically take us by surprise, and yet we can question where we should move forward as Christians and those of us who obviously care so much about our nation, which I know is every member of the AFR family that's listening right now. But it shouldn't have us question why evil exists. We shouldn't question the goodness or the sovereignty of God. But in those moments, Jesus has told us, don't be surprised when you're persecuted and hated for my sake. I mean, this has been an ongoing battle and will continue until Christ calls us home or until he returns and the new heaven and new earth come. And so this is a moment in time that we need to be strategic on a temporal level, but also understand that this has been an eternal battle. And we have to be prepared to understand the moment and also understand where the Bible has predicted all of this, and it really shouldn't take us by surprise. So when you're talking, Dinesh, about taking up Charlie's work and continuing that, what does that look like to you, and what should that look like for conservatives on a practical level?
Well, I think on a practical level, it just means that we have to just think clearly about what renewal means. So in the past, flashing my mind back now to my earlier career, the Reagan era, we tended to see our opponents sort of as merely misguided. This was kind of, you could almost call it the Greek view. I say the Greek view because Socrates' view is that people don't really do evil things. They are ignorant, and you just have to keep educating them. And so our assumption was that the Democrats and the left, they're just bunglers. They don't know what they're doing. We have to sort of spell it out, and then they'll understand, and they'll do better. I think we now realize that, yes, there is a lot of ignorance, and yes, we do have to do that. And I don't think it's wrong to presume goodwill. But on the other hand, I also think that there's just some dark forces at play. We've seen that very much in the last decade or so, even in our politics as well as in our culture. People who are actually choosing evil over good, right? This is Paul when he says, the good that I would, I do not, the evil that I would not, that I do. What basically Paul is saying is this is not a matter of knowledge. I actually know what's right. I know what's wrong. But I'm tempted to choose what's wrong, knowingly, willingly. And that's going on to a great degree. So I think once we're alert to all this, we've got to recognize that our job here is to bring out the positive institutions of our culture, strengthen the family, strengthen local communities, strengthen churches, strengthen an outpouring of spirituality and investigation as to what is right, what is wrong, draw our friends closer to us, people who are working toward the good. And so, to pick the example, since we talked earlier for a moment about anti-Semitism, Israel is on the front line fighting against radical Islam. Israel is doing this better than anyone else. We don't know how to fight radical Islam. I say this because after 9/11, what did we do? Well, even going further back, Jimmy Carter basically helped the Shah of Iran come to power by pulling the Persian rug out from the Shah. So we created, to a degree, radical Islam. That was bad. Then later, we couldn't find bin Laden. And then we got 9/11. And after 9/11, we went and we blew out the Taliban, but they're back. We went to Iraq. We botched that whole operation. So we clearly don't know what we're doing in fighting radical Islam. But Israel does. And so isn't it ironic that our friend, our ally, that's doing a job that we don't even know how to do, that is of invaluable importance to us on the world stage, and there are lots of people on our side who are basically saying Israel is the bad guy and going to the extent of implying, if not suggesting, well, maybe Israel killed Charlie Kirk. I mean, this to me is not only outrageous, like morally, but it's also downright stupid because think of it. It's essentially causing a poisonous divide on our own side, cutting us off from our own friends. And so it is not just wrong and evil, it's very self-destructive.
So well said, and this is a great moment to take a break, because we're going to be back with Dinesh D'Souza talking about your new movie that is called The Dragon's Prophecy, and it makes a moral case for Israel using a unique and timely biblical angle. And we want to support that. And this is such an amazing time for this film to come out. And so we'll be right back with more with Dinesh D'Souza and his new movie that ties into everything that we've been talking about right after this.
Hello, I'm Don Hawkins, here to tell you about Encouragement Live. 55 minutes of industrial strength radio encouragement featuring resourceful guests, plus practical biblical insights to help you face life's challenges. We'll be taking your phone calls, so plan to join us for Encouragement Live, Saturdays at 7:05 p.m. Central, 8:05 p.m. Eastern, here on American Family Radio.
Wall Builders is dedicated to revealing the truth behind America's founding. Here's Tim Barton, president of Wall Builders.
Our goal here at Wall Builders is to present America's forgotten history and heroes, emphasizing the religious, moral, and constitutional heritage and foundation of our nation. Today, so few people recognize what has made this nation really the most successful, prosperous nation in the history of the world. It's a biblical foundation.
Listen to Wall Builders Live, Sunday mornings at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
Hi, I'm Jan Harper. If you are a pastor's wife, come be encouraged and renewed as you share your challenges and stresses unique to pastors and their wives.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat is coming October 28th through the 30th. You're invited to join us at Pickwick Landing State Park in Counce, Tennessee for 3 days of encouragement, renewal, and worship. Once again, Brother Bert Harper, AFA Director of Family and Pastoral Ministries, will host the retreat along with his wife Jan. Our speakers will include J.J. Jasper and Dr. Alex McFarland. If you've attended in the past, we'd love to see you again. And if you've never experienced a fishbowl retreat, we especially invite you to be refreshed and renewed. The per-couple admission price includes lodging, meals, and materials. Visit repairingthefoundations.net to learn more and register. That's repairingthefoundations.net.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat. We'd love to see you there.
Hey, my name is Wesley Wildman.
And I'm Walker Wildman.
And we're brothers, and our family have been leading tours to the land of the Bible for more than 30 years.
Coming up in March of 2026, we would love for you to join us for something very special, a Footsteps of Paul tour, a journey through Greece.
We'll walk exactly where the Apostle Paul walked, through Athens, ancient Corinth, Philippi, and Thessalonica.
You'll enjoy unforgettable experiences and meaningful fellowship with believers and with Wesley and Walker.
And we'll eat well, laugh a lot, and yes, eat well again. And most importantly, we will grow in our faith as the Bible comes alive before your eyes. You'll get to see the very things that we read about or that your pastor talks about in church.
The Footsteps of Paul tour is March 17th through the 24th, 2026.
Register today at wildmangroup.com.
That's wildmangroup.com. We can't wait to see you there.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. My good friend Dinesh D'Souza still joins me. He is a director and the host of the Dinesh D'Souza Show, which all of you should be listening to. Some of his analysis and insights are really incredible that you won't find anywhere, and so that's one of the shows that I rarely miss. And he has a brand new film that is coming out in an exclusive limited release on October 6th and 8th, and then streaming on multiple platforms platforms like Salem Now beginning on October 9th. Theater locations and tickets will be available through the website, thedragonsprophecyfilm.com. That's thedragonsprophecyfilm.com. And so this is a really timely look at the moral case for Israel, and this uses a unique and timely biblical angle. Tell us more about this film, Dinesh. And you've been the director of many film projects, and everything you do is always really fascinating. So why this film and right now?
The film, Jenna, is a little bit of a departure for me. My earlier films have, in one way or another, all been about the meaning of America. This film ultimately it's about Israel, it's about Hamas, it's about radical Islam, it's about biblical archaeology, it has a hint of biblical prophecy. So ultimately you could say that this is a film about good and evil and about the human soul. It springs out of an insight from the writer Jonathan Cahn, who wrote the book, the international bestseller called The Dragon's Prophecy. And in discussing October 7th and in discussing the war, Jonathan Cahn makes the point that the battle going on now between Israel and Hamas and the allies of Hamas is a weird and eerie replay. It's a recreation of ancient battles that the Israelites in the Bible fought against their enemies, not just the Amalekites and the Hittites, but most importantly, the Philistines. Now, the Philistines were based in an area that we today call the Gaza Strip. At that time, it was called Philistia. And the Philistia was made up of 5 cities, and the Bible specifically mentions the most important of them, Gaza. Now, the word Philistine and the word Palestinian are the same word. Through a kind of weird travel through history, this word made its way from the Philistines to the Palestinians. But I think Khan's most important point is that the tactics of the Palestinians or of Hamas and of the Philistines are also the same. So here's an example of what I mean. Think about the biblical hero Samson, who represents like the strength of Israel. And Samson is captured by, well, the Philistines. And what do? The first thing they do is they blind him. So kind of the way that Israel was, quote, blinded in October 7th. And then they say, the Bible says Samson was taken to Gaza. And then it says he was stripped, and the people of Gaza demanded, quote, bring us Samson so we might be entertained by him. And if you watch the footage right immediately following October 7th, the attacks, these hostages were taken to Gaza, they were stripped, and they were paraded through the streets while the people laughed and cheered and handed out sweets. So you notice a kind of resemblance here. It's almost like what happened in ancient times is coming back. You can say that Samson was in some ways the first hostage of Gaza. And Jonathan Cahn's point is that October 7th wasn't just like an historical event. It wasn't just even an epical event. It was a biblical event, and then we as Christians need to be attentive to the spiritual meaning of what is going on in Israel through what is God trying to tell us through these events.
And that is so incredibly timely, and to tie it into history, I think goes right along with everything that we've been talking about today with the broader perspective of this ongoing spiritual battle between right and wrong and good and evil. And we have seen throughout history that since Abraham, I mean, there has been a concerted effort against Israel, against God's people, and even in the New Testament age to warp and pervert what God truly thinks about Israel. And so when we tie this into the events of October 7th, and we're almost on the 2-year anniversary of that terrible terrorist attack, how does this film put that into the context that you're talking about of the overall view of how the world looks at Israel, not just necessarily the Philistines and Hamas who are carrying out these atrocities, but even allies and perhaps skeptics like the United States.
Yeah. So the film begins with putting the viewer, you, like on the scene of October 7th. Now, how can I do that? Normally in my films, I recreate things. But in this case, Hamas filmed it all. And I've been collecting these videos, and my wife has for the past 2 years. And we realized that the world has not seen it. In a movie, you have to be there. You have to see it for yourself. In my film 2000 News, for example, it's not enough to say, I'm going to tell you everything about election fraud. I've got to show you what people are doing with backpacks in the middle of the night. Similarly here, you can see the October 7 attacks from the point of view of the attacker. It's almost like you have a GoPro on, and you're going to go across from Gaza into the kibbutzes of Israel because that's who filmed it. So that's how we begin the film. Now, the deep question here is not just how do you respond to a terrorist attack, but rather whose land is it really? And that raises a broader question. How does any country get the title deeds to a piece of land? So this film is very much anchored in current events. It addresses things like the left-wing critique that Israel is a colonizing power, the right-wing critique coming from people like Tucker, which is like, how do you know that the Jews of today are the true descendants of the ancient Israelites? All of this is addressed in the film, but at the root, the film does look at the question of, does this land belong to the Jews? Did God give it to them? If God did give it to them, did he take it back when Jesus came along? In other words, did God say, all right, well, you know what? You are my chosen people, but guess what? You're no longer my chosen people because you've been behaving badly, and the Christians are here to replace you, and we don't need the Old Testament anymore. So all of this stuff that people, especially young people, are talking about today is discussed at a completely new level in the film. So my goal is to raise the level of the debate.
And I love this, and I love that you're doing it through film, because so much of this multimedia it reaches especially young people, I think, in a way that traditional books or even other types of multimedia don't. And these types of questions are so incredibly important, and they have been since, of course, the church era began. But when we see people, and my audience knows I talked about this quite a lot after Ted Cruz and Tucker, when we see people like Ted Cruz almost stumbling to make a case for supporting Israel and not really understanding, or at least not being able to articulate the answers to these questions biblically, it really does matter that we can give an answer to these questions. And, one of the things that you mentioned in that, Dinesh, was, how does a nation have a title right to a piece of land? And I think this is so unique about Israel because I can't think of another covenant that God made with a nation to say that you have a right to this land other than Israel. I mean, that makes them unique and special. And so we've seen throughout world history that boundaries of nations have changed all the time. I mean, we look at the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Nobody's arguing the right to the land from a biblical perspective. But we do as Christians when it comes to the nation of Israel. And I think that's important.
Yeah, and let's even just apply a little bit of kind of common sense to the matter. First of all, when you give a piece of land or when you buy a piece of land, you always buy it in perpetuity, right, Jenna? If you bought a house, you're not buying that house for 8 years. That's called renting. If you buy or leasing, if you buy a house, it's yours in perpetuity. You can give it to your kids. They can give it to their kids. So if God truly gave the land to Abraham and his descendants, you can't take it back, because if you take it back, then you never gave it in the first place. It was never their land. Okay? The second point is, think about how countries get land. Like, how do you get the title deeds to any piece of land anywhere in the world? And the answer is you get it one of three ways. You get it by original inhabitancy, you get it by negotiation or treaty, or you get it by conquest. I don't know a single piece of real estate in the world that hasn't been obtained in one of these ways. Now, here's the remarkable thing about Israel. It checks all three boxes. The Jews were there first, original inhabitancy, check. The UN gave the land after World War II, that's treaty or negotiation, check. And Israel has fought three wars, 1948, 1967, 1973. They have held the land by conquest. That checks the third box. Even America doesn't meet that test, right? The Native Americans can say, we are here first, check. Then the white man can say, well, we took the land by conquest, check on the other side. So it's a debate. The point I'm trying to make is that the Jews have a stronger right to Israel than just about any people in the world, including America, has a right to this land.
Yeah, and it's a perfect argument. And you also sent me a portion that you posted on X of an interview that you had with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, asking if the current Jews in Israel have any connection to the Jews of the Bible, and thus would be part of that that right to the land and that into perpetuity kind of succession. And I thought that conversation was fascinating. So first, where can we find that full interview? And then what was your key takeaway?
So I did basically 40 minutes with Netanyahu one-on-one, and I'm going to do a special edition of my podcast on it. But there's about 5 or 6 minutes, kind of the most glittering 5 or 6 minutes in the film. And it's Netanyahu like you haven't seen him before. I think sometimes Netanyahu comes across a little like clipped because I think he's on the defensive. He feels under siege. So he seems to be using rehearsed kind of talking points, but not here. Because what I did was I kind of sprung some questions on him that kind of threw him off his normal stride. Like I asked him, hey, like Netanyahu, like what do you think of Jesus? Pause. And then he's like, wow, I haven't heard this one really exactly this way before. So he opens up and he begins to let his hair down, if you will. And as a result, he really gets into it. He addresses Tucker Carlson like one-on-one. And I love this kind of stuff. And this is really very cinematic as well. In a film, you don't want a lot of boilerplate. You want people to speak in a clear, decisive way to the issues because a film is just such a compressed format. So all of this is in the film, which, by the way, releases right around October 7th on the second anniversary. So it's in theaters, as you mentioned, the day before, October 6th, the day after, October 8th. And then the very next day, October 9th, it's available in streaming, it's available in DVD. But the one-stop shop to get it is the website. And if I can mention it, Jenna, it's thedragonsprophecyfilm.com. So dragons plural, thedragonsprophecyfilm.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dinesh D'Souza, for this really important project. I'm going to plan to go see that. I'll look in my area for where this film is showing and then also stream it on Salem. And this is so important, I think, and so timely for all of the reasons that we've discussed, but it puts into the broader context the answers to these questions. And one of the things that we learned, I think, from Charlie Kirk is how much especially young people today, are really hungry for the truth. They want answers. They're not actually afraid of being confronted. Even people who are total leftists, some of these students, they were still willing to stand up to the microphone to ask their questions and listen to Charlie's answers. And that's an incredible, I think, obligation and mantle that we need to take to consistently put out content like this that is willing to address the difficult questions, but do it thoroughly, do it biblically, and do it honestly. So the film is The Dragon's Prophecy, and the website is The Dragons, as you said, plural, thedragonsprophecyfilm.com, thedragonsprophecyfilm.com. You can also follow Dinesh D'Souza on social media, and then also watch his show, The Dinesh D'Souza Show, that streams everywhere you can find podcasts. And as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.